Hello everyone, Rory Neary from TDG Data Spinners and Power Addicts. I'm continuing with the accounts close notification process. In the previous session, we set up a Power App, and now what we're going to do is to create a flow that will look at the results of the Power App and send a notification. So I'm going to move over now to Office 365. So we left the app in roughly this state, and we're actually done with the app. So I am going to make sure I do file, save, and close out of it. Now I'll go on to Microsoft Office, which is www.office.com, and I'm now going to move over to Flow. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create a flow, and the purpose of the flow is to notify us when all of the tasks are complete. So what I'm going to do is you go to My Flows in order to create a flow, which is slightly strange. So you go to My Flow and you're going to do New, and we are going to create it. I'm going to create it from automated from blank, and automated essentially means that in this case that SharePoint will be the trigger. And I am going to call this one user Rory. We'll call this accounts close notification. Bear in mind that there's going to be a lot of flows in here for everyone that is doing it in this environment. So on the trigger, I'm just going to type in SharePoint. SharePoint. Okay. So when an item is created or modified, we'll need to do, because essentially we're looking for this modification process. So when it's modified, we're going to perform a task. So I'm going to click create at this point in time. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in the site address. Now you should just be able to hit the drop down, and it will actually put in it'll offer you the only site that you've actually got access to anyway. So we'll click on that. Then we'll go to the list name. Now you have to pick your list, otherwise it's going to be quite chaotic. So I'm going to click this user Rory month end, and then we are going to do certain sort of decisions based upon that. So the way in which this works is that we need to go, and when an item is created or modified, what we're going to do is go and get a list of the SharePoint items where the task is actually done. And it'll feel strange, but maybe by the time we get to the end of it, it will actually make more sense. But let's just roll with this. So I'm going to do a new step, and I'm going to say I'm going to type in get item. That should get me to this get items option here, and it's items, so it's not just a single item, it's get items. And then we're going to say, well, why are we going to get the list from? It's this site, and it is the same list as we just chose earlier on, but this time we need to go to the advanced options, and we need to do a particular filter. Now the filter is that, and this is, I guess this is, we're starting to get into a sort of formula land here, but essentially it needs to be task, because task is the field name, and then EQ essentially is the word here that we use for equals, and what we're going to do is the task is actually the task name that we initially started with. So let me just look down on here and just make sure we've actually got task. Yeah, equals task. And make sure that you use a single quote here on either side of where it says task, and where we say, and we also do another condition where done in capitals, done, which is the field name, and then it's EQ, lowercase EQ, and then do a little a single quote and do capitals, and it's no here. So what we're saying is get me all of the items that haven't been done. Now the reason for doing this is we're basically going to count them, and once we get to 0, we know that the task has been done, and then we're going to send an email out. So it kind of feels strange, but it's actually okay. Now I'm going to press save on that, and let's just see when an item is created or modified. Now what we will find on this is that the trigger it's kind of slow, so we might find that it takes maybe it might take a minute to fire. Now so the way in which to get this thing to fire is we have to actually literally modify an item. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go on to my app. So yeah, I will go on there. I'm in Power Apps now, and I'm just going to press play. In fact, I'll just go back to the start, go to Power Apps, and then I will go on to my apps, which is on the left hand side, hit the 3 dots here, and then press play, because now we're actually going to use the app as you might do, and obviously you can do it on your phone. In fact, I've made a mistake, because if you actually go to the versions, go into the details here, and you go into versions, what you'll actually see is that the one that's live is version 1, and if I can't click on version 2, I need to actually publish that. So if I publish this version, it's quite a good story actually, and then click publish, that means that that is now the live version of the app, which means that when we go to, we should just be able to straight refresh this actually. We should find that we get the most recent, sometimes it takes a teeny bit of time for this to come through. I forgive you, Power Apps. You're still awesome. So click on apps, and then I'm going to go straight from here and see if that has updated. So press play here again. Look, if it doesn't work this time, I'll be a weeny bit surprised, but we'll see. In fact, it has now updated. So it took maybe, I don't know, 30, 40 seconds. I'll take that. So what I'm going to now do is I am going to see how quickly the trigger will work. So what this means is I'm just going to go onto the flow itself and just make sure I save it. I'm now going to hit the back button. At this point in time, the flow doesn't actually do anything of any consequence, but I'll hit the back. It will always say you'll lose all your changes, but I've already pressed save on it, and that's fine. So, and if I look at this here, this flow is actually on. It's offering me turn off, but it means it's actually on. Now, what that means is that I can go onto my app, which I've just lost momentarily, and I can now click on Sales Ledger, and I can now go to edit this item, and I can click done is yes, and click submit item. And if I go back to the home screen and click refresh, we should find it was either Europe or South. We should find, South has just been updated. Now that is a trigger for this flow here. So the theory goes is that this flow should be running now. I know that this trigger is it's not slow, but it might take, the very first time you create them, it might take like 3 or 4 minutes for it to fire. So I'm just going to click refresh. It might be running, it might not. Yeah, it hasn't started running. I'm not too concerned about that. It will be quite slow, but we've actually kicked it off. That's fine. I'll just let it carry on. So I'm going to click edit now. And it's going to get items. That's wonderful. So the next step is actually the only part of this process that is actually complicated. It's not that complicated, to be honest, but it does involve a formula. So what we're going to do is we're going to calculate the number of remaining tasks. So the next part of the process is we're literally going to do a count of the number of items we actually found. Now, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to here, and I am going to rename this step and just rename it to, I'm going to rename it to get filtered. Actually, I don't want it to be capitals. This actually will affect the formula later on, so just make sure that you've got exactly this. So get filtered items, and then the new step is going to be it's a compose operation. So it is kind of fiddly, but it's the only way I could get this to actually it's probably the right way to do it, to be fair. So we're going to do this thing called a compose, which is like a just a special formula. And in this compose, we need to write an expression. And this is kind of slightly getting into the pro dev sort of arena, but it's still a very simple flow that we're going to do. And invariably, it's not actually as complicated as this. So what we need to do is we need to get the number of items that we actually found. And the way to do that is I'm just going to go to this dynamic content piece, and there's my get filtered items. And what I need to do, I'm actually going to have to write the expression in full. I don't think I can get away with just with picking them, but quite often you can sort of bring in something. In fact, that's not going to work at all. So delete that. In fact, I'm going to have to delete this entire thing. So I'll go OK to that. So I'll get my new step. I'm typing compose again, data operations, and there's my compose inputs. I'm going to expression, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it's an int. So int means that it's going to return an integer. The way to return the way to do this is actually we use this thing called length, and actually the length formula actually returns the number of items inside an array, essentially a list of things. So, and the array, so it's int, which is outside length, and believe it or not, when this length thing it returns text, which we have to convert into an integer. So then the next part of the formula is, and I'll put this in the, I'll probably put it into the Excel spreadsheet. So it's going to be body, which is going to effectively look further up, and it's going to be this quote get underscore filtered. Now I need to be very careful on this because items, which is essentially from the step above, close the brackets, and this it is really, to be honest, I think this whole thing is just a really bizarre language if I'm but most of the time you don't have to do this. It's just this particular one, and then it's quote lowercase value. As I say, I'll stick this into the Excel spreadsheet, and so that should get us over the line. Now, all being well, when you click OK on this, then it will actually go in. But if it genuinely isn't correct, then it will error at this point. So we'll see if this works. Does it actually work, or at least it says it's working? And so what we're looking to do is to it should return us a number, and then what we'll do is, based on the number that is returned, we'll put a conditional statement in to make it go in different directions. So at this point in my life, what I would be doing is I would click and save, and I would be testing it. So I am just going to go and see if that flow ever run. So you can actually see that flow that we looked at earlier on has actually, it says it succeeded. We can go and look at it. But the reason I did it was so that I could then edit it, and from a testing perspective, I can actually go use data from previous runs, which means that we can click on this and see if it's actually working. We can actually see inside the flow. So I'm going to click test here, and it's run rather quickly. And so what it did is it went and saw that the division, the task sales ledger for the division south was marked as done. Okay, fine. That's interesting. But then what it did was, I'm just going to make this, hopefully get this to, then it got the filtered items. So actually, if you look further on down here, it then filtered it to the items that hadn't been done. Now this in theory should return 3 items, but as you can see, it's quite hard to actually read this thing. So it should actually return 2 items. So if I look at this SharePoint list, then for Interco, I'm just going to check the list. It should have returned 2 items, and what we'll see on the flow is that the compose operation should return 2. Good, it has returned 2. That's what I wanted. The plan is that when it returns 0, we'll get an email. So what I'm going to do is continue with the flow because it's doing what I want it to do. So go for a new step. And what I'm going to do there is I am going to type in the word condition, and you can select it from the top. I like to select it from here anyway. Actions, condition. Now it's choose a value where output is equal to 0. So this is when the task has been done. And then we want it to do something. So we'll go add an action, and then we'll get it to send an email, and we will then send an email, which is just going to be this. There's lots of ways of sending an email. The V2 one is a slightly prettier email. I'll go with the V2, but there are reasons not to use it. And what it's going to do is I'm going to use, I'm going to get it to send it to me personally, because I'm theoretically the person overseeing this. But you might, get it to be sent to, you'd be putting in your username, which would be user something. User, you can see all the users there. Just get it to send it to yourself. And then subject is something like the, and I'm just going to pick from the task that we found earlier on. So the task, which is dynamic, has, and carry on typing, has been completed. And you always have to put something in the body. I'll put this was completed by, and then you would actually be able to find out who actually lasted it. It's kind of pointless at this point, but there are lots of things that you could do, and so you could actually know effectively who the last person was if you want to kind of work out who's taking ages to do things. So this was completed by, modified by display name. So this is effectively going to be the last person in the chain. Now I would say if this is an accounts process, am I bothered about whether or not other people have done it? I'm actually only wanting to get an email when the task has been fully completed. So if I do save and then do test, then what we'll find is that if I redo this, then it won't go down the 0 leg, it'll go down the other leg. And in fact, what I would do on this is I'm going to type in terminate. So it actually means that it's easier to kind of read. And so I will say that actually, I'll type in cancelled, because then we'll be able to see that step, it actually went down that leg. So I'm going to do save. And then if I do test, I'll perform using the data from previous actions, and then do save and test. Then what we'll do is we should see it run down the right hand leg of this. It's still saying the flow is running, so it needs to work it out. I have a slight concern that the way in which I did the condition was potentially incorrect, but this is part of the fun of flow. So we'll see how that. So at this point, I'm sort of thinking I'm a bit concerned now, because anytime you see a flow take a long time to run, you've got to be asking yourself why, because this one is really simple. So I am going to let it run, but I think there's a problem with it. As it turns out, I think it actually finished running, and it just sort of said it hadn't finished running, which is a little bit odd. And if I refresh, if I go back on this, we'll be able to see, yeah, it says test cancelled, but it's kind of like it's okay. It actually went down the cancelled leg. So if we actually have a look at it, we can actually look on this bit where it's a condition, and we can actually see that it actually ran down the terminate leg. Now the reason for doing this is we want it to actually run down the send an email leg, because we've actually done our flow now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go onto the app itself, and I am going to complete Interco, and we should see that we find out that Interco has been completed. And then I'm going to click the OK on that, and then go there. And if I actually refresh this, you should see that I should now get an email which says Interco task has been completed. So let's go and have a look at the run history, go onto there, and if I refresh it now, as I say, I don't know how quick a trigger this is. It's not, if this was on what's known as CDS, Common Data Service, it's lightning quick. It is just unbelievably quick. This trigger is slightly slower. So it may be that there are varying times at which it kicks in. But this is designed, we should get it within a couple of minutes. And, there's a challenge there to say, well, look, if you want instant responses and so on, you do need to understand that some, not all triggers are created alike. So as it turned out, it might have taken it a minute to actually kick into gear, which which I don't have a problem with. If we actually look at the flow itself, then it said it ran it successfully, and we actually have a look at the condition, then we should see that an email, the interco has been completed. This was completed by X, which is, believe it or not, it was completed by me. And so that means if I go onto my emails and then onto Outlook, we should, now bear in mind, if you've got like a test 10, then, things can sometimes take time. In fact, I have no idea what time is going on this thing here. But I think that it must be I think it might be an American region or something like that. So don't be too concerned about the timing and so on of that. So at this point, the flow is actually complete. I'm just for fun, I'm just going to complete all of them, and that should mean that, in fact, if we kind of click on this sales ledger one and we go to edit there and then go to yes and then click on that and then back and then just do the quick refresh, then we know that is not complete, and it ended up going down the cancelled leg. So if I click on this, I don't think it'll have run by now. Yeah, you can see it hasn't run. But what we should see is we should get a test cancelled for that. And what I'm now going to do is I'm also going to do the this final one here, and that should mean that the sales ledger task will be shown as having been completed. So if I go there and then click refresh on that, then we can see that it's complete for sales ledger. And if we could sit on our emails and just watch that for a bit, I'm sort of from a testing perspective just jumping back onto here just to see what's actually happening. And it's saying 10 seconds ago, 16 seconds ago. I'm interested in this one which says 16 seconds ago because I was kind of expecting a test cancelled. So let's have a quick squiz at that and see what it got up to. Condition, it said true, a little bit worrying. And I think that this might have been a timing thing. It might be that actually because the trigger didn't fire that quickly, it then ended up picking up something else. So I think that it literally found 0, and then I ran it again. So you can see there's a little bit of latency going on there. I'm not massively, the reality of life is that people don't do things within 30 seconds of each other. And if I got 2 emails, frankly, it wouldn't concern me too much. I just know that it was done. So that means if I look on here, I'm not surprised. I've got 2 emails and we can see that the sales ledger has been completed. So there we are. The this exercise, the Power Apps, the combination of Power Apps and a flow to manage your month-end tasks. The flow, although it had awkward elements to it, it is very, very simple flow. The thing to remember is when we did the get filtered items, we need to remember that we use this filter query thing here, which is a little bit awkward. And also on the compose operation, it was a little bit awkward as well. And also there's a very strong relationship between this bit where it says body get filtered items and this here. So if we change the name of this, I think that the expression would actually fail. So you need to make sure they're aligned. And I'd probably say if that you had that type of task, you wouldn't actually have gaps between them. You'd probably write them in capitals, and then it would be easier to write the function later on. So I am all done with this. Hope you've found this useful and you get a chance to use it in your organization. See you again soon. Bye.